Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, today is the 26th of October 2022. Um, I recorded one of these last week, and it's still technically in the can, but like an idiot, the audio thing that I've been using, that I recorded the episode with Gil with, um, it's it's from a company called Rode, and they have this software that you have to use to extract the audio files from the devices. And it is impossibly slow on my Mac. Like, ridiculously novelty slow. Like, you click a button and it beach balls, and then like 10 minutes later, something pops up or something happens. I have not been able to extract the files from it. So am I gonna get the audio out of there? I don't know. I cannot say with any kind of confidence or certainty. I hope so. If I do, there will be another episode coming out of sequence, but we'll see. I don't have a great deal of confidence at the moment in that. Anyway, moving forward, uh, I've been very busy also, which is not helping the cadence on these. So the combination of that not working and then a little bit of stretched time. I'm having lunch with Gil though on Friday, and yeah, I'd like to get one of these out before then. So I'm gonna try to get this one in the can instead of recording. Well, it is recording to the device as well, but it should be recording to Logic on my computer, assuming that the communication through the wall is okay. We'll see. We'll see. I'm a little nervous, but if it works, you'll hear this, and if it doesn't, I will have to figure something else out, and I'll be very annoyed because I do like recording these, but it's much nicer to record it and then have something to show for that. And the audio coming from the iPhone by itself is horrible. I mean, it's pretty fucking bad. So we'll hope that that isn't what we have to resort to. Anyway, it seems like Elon Musk is finally closing the deal with Twitter. Um, it's weird how he frames this because it's like he decided to do it, but really what happened is basically he made a ridiculous offer, and court in Delaware basically compelled him to do it. So he's doing it at the offer price, which I think is overpriced for Twitter. Unfortunately, he's got people backing him, which is just annoying as hell. It's like Sequoia Capital and some of these other companies, and it's like, yeah, it just irritates you because it means that he's not as exposed as he should be. The hope would be that he basically has to liquidate a bunch of his Tesla stock and buys this company that he can no longer sell at that price, so he instantly loses a lot of money. One would hope also that it would just, yeah, I mean, the beautiful version of it would basically be that he financially destroyed himself. I can't imagine that happening because he's got too many fanboys who think he's a fucking demigod. But could wish, could hope. Not that I have animosity toward him. I mean, like Trump, I kind of almost halfway feel bad for these people because I do think, like they had a shitty childhood, were raised poorly, and just they're like Kanye. I don't think that he like came out of the egg when he was hatched. I don't think he was a bad person intrinsically, but and in fact, like his mom was going to Kanye. His mom was a professor, and I suspect. I mean, he was raised, I think, at kind of the height of the self-esteem period. So I think his mom was like, "Oh, you're so amazing. You're so amazing. And you do too much of this with kids, and you build an ego monster. And you add to that, I mean, extreme ego decoupled from any kind of achievement, which is not to say he hasn't achieved a lot, but his ego is independent of that. And weirdly, success in our culture has a lot to do with ego. So unfortunately, you get rewarded for having quite an ego. Um, it's one of the reasons that Musk is able to go to Sequoia Capital and have them back a deal that's really shitty, and can't possibly make money because, well, I mean, everything can make money. Seems like a dumb deal to me, though. But one of the reasons that he's able to do that is because he has ridiculous confidence. And yeah, I don't know, it just depresses the fuck out of me, the way things work. But, Kanye, you have that. You have, I mean, he doesn't even have, I don't think, an undergrad degree. And I think it's probably because you raise somebody to think that they're awesome no matter what. And they're like, why should I bother learning anything because I'm already great, right? Which is pretty fucked up. It's, I would much rather people assume that they're, I think imposter syndrome gets a bad rap. And I do think there's definitely a thing where you have a lot of people who have imposter syndrome and they don't even apply to jobs that they're more than capable of doing. And then you have like often cishet white dudes who vastly overestimate themselves and apply to jobs that they have no business doing. And so you get some populations that miss out on those jobs and some that get those opportunities that should not have them. But I do think normalizing for that, I would much rather have somebody have imposter syndrome and be very capable than think that they're amazing and be kind of, and not that they're intrinsically shitty, but they're just not very good at something. And it's a thing. I mean, when you learn to fly, just using that as an example because it's something I'm working on. When I first started, you're doing all of these things at the same time. You're paying attention to so much, and just paying attention to the six-pack, the altimeter, the airspeed, looking at what you're doing with the engine, and all of the orientation, all this kind of stuff. You look at that kind of stuff, and it's hard. But then at a certain point, you keep working on it, and you start feeling like less of an idiot, and you start feeling competent. And at a certain point, you're like, oh, I'm not amazing at this, but I can actually do it. I can actually fly, which is crazy. And similarly with the IFR, when I first started doing it, I've always been pretty good at flying by instruments. In fact, somewhat to my detriment, because when I was doing the initial private pilot stuff, I would kind of get my head into the cockpit, and you need to be flying by sight. There are reasons to be outside of the cockpit too. And it took a little bit of extra time to get myself out of the cockpit. But I'm pretty good at controlling based on the attitude indicator and the airspeed and all of these kinds of things. The hard thing with IFR, really two things. One, communications, and two, more than that, is just the procedures. And once you have the procedures and you get pretty competent and fluent at reading the approaches and loading the approaches and briefing the approaches and all this kind of stuff, it's not that bad. Yeah, especially with a modern glass cockpit. I know, like before you had the moving map and all this kind of stuff, flying on a VOR using the little steam gauge thing, I could totally do it, but it's a lot more workload to do that and navigate by a paper map and read a paper chart, and you're doing all this kind of extra stuff versus, especially with an autopilot, you have the autopilot, you have the moving map, and you do have to make sure you know what you're doing and that the autopilot isn't doing anything crazy. But if you do that stuff, it's a much lighter lift. In fact, I'm glad that I learned on the glass cockpit. I never want to fly with the steam gauge again unless I had to. But I do kind of feel like my flight instructor first learned IFR on steam gauges. And I think that forces you to be better. It probably forces you to be a little bit more aware of entries and holds and all of that kind of stuff. And it does come, like, I'm pretty good at it now. I'm feeling pretty confident at it. I'm not like 100%. I'm totally going to slam dunk the check ride, but I feel pretty confident at it. But I feel like you'd just be an extra level ahead if you learned the hard way and then you made it easy on yourself. And yeah, I think Kanye has the opposite thing, which is everything has been so easy and kind of handed to him that he thinks he's amazing without actually being. And similarly, Musk. I mean, it's so annoying. It's so annoying. And it's depressing also because I like Tesla. I have a Tesla. They're cool cars. If the self-driving thing was just meant to be an autopilot system and augmenting and enhancing your driving, and it worked like a plane where you basically set it up and it kind of takes care of stuff. It gives you the ability to not necessarily like, fuck around on Twitter while you're driving, but you could navigate or you could look at something else or do something while you're kind of doing your scan and you're pretty safe. That would be so much more useful and that would be basically built already. Versus this thing that he's sold, which is door-to-door driving, basically like level 5 automation, and they're nowhere near it. And on one hand, as someone who would like to do some stuff in robotics, it makes me feel a little bit better that they're nowhere near it, although it also is annoying because they have billions of fucking dollars and they're able to build their own chips and their own tightly coupled supercomputer, and it's just like, it hurts a little bit. It's like, I would love to have a fraction of those resources, and I feel like I could do more with it because arrogance and all of that kind of stuff. But what I want to get to there is just it's depressing about the Twitter thing, and it's depressing also that by rights it should be like some idiot bragged and they like went to an auction and then bought something they couldn't possibly afford and then faced the consequences of it, and it basically financially destroys them. And for a normal person, I'd feel bad, But for Musk, if it financially destroyed him, I think it would be a net positive on the world, I think SpaceX would still probably go on. I think Tesla would probably be better. Although I know some people who used to work there and know people who still work there, and it sounds like it's becoming an environment that's full of Muskites, which I'm sure SpaceX is too, and that's not helping. It's the problem of being Michael Jackson. If you're Elon Musk and you have nothing but sycophants around you and nothing but people telling you how amazing you are, it almost guarantees that you can't be. You have nothing checking you. You end up with that Zorg rather, hairdo that he had for a little while. And yeah, it's just, I mean, anyway, let that sink in. Like the dad joke on Twitter, carrying a sink into the Twitter headquarters. It's like, it's frustrating. Anyway, I don't want to, it depresses me. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and it depresses me to think, like, if he lets go of a big chunk of the staff and basically takes away a lot of, like right now there's almost no moderation, and he gets rid of what little there is, it's going to be just a fucking shit show, right? It's going to be probably like 4chan or worse. And I'm not really into that, If I was into that, I'd be on that fucking 4chan shit, or 8chan, or whatever the hell. But anyway, Serenity Now and all that. What I did want to talk about today, always, as ever, comes from Twitter. And I was interacting with some people this morning. There are a few people who, I don't know exactly what motivates them to do this, but they like to tag a bunch of people and kind of direct us to, hey, look, make fun of Dr. Oz. And frankly, I don't want to talk, I blocked Dr. Oz a long time ago. Never want to interact with the person. Like all these other people that I keep mentioning, it's like a theme tonight. This is not a person who, he should have like moderate success in life. And it's interesting how many people like this, that secret guy, all these people came from Oprah, Dr. Phil. And I think it kind of makes you think like Oprah has done a lot of harm to the world by elevating these people. But that's not what I wanted to talk about exactly. This guy tags me and a bunch of other people, like leftists, and he's like, hey, pick on Dr. Oz. And I looked at it, I was like, I thought about it. I didn't respond to that, but I responded to him. And we started a conversation with a few of the people he tagged. And one of the things that came up was this idea, and this is a perennial thing that I always encounter or run into on Twitter, because I have a lot of people who I interact with regularly, kind of friends with there, who are of the mindset that basically both parties suck. And so voting, essentially the idea would be that voting for the Democrats is yielding when somebody is a terrorist and they have a gun pointed to a kid's head. That yes, the terrorist would be the Democrats, to be clear here, because consistently they actually elevate people like Trump, the Pied Piper thing. Carrie Lake, I guess they didn't put money in, but they still elevated her in the primary. And then a whole bunch of other MAGA people, they actually put, I think they spent like $50 million of money that was donated by people who thought they were supporting Democrats. They put that into MAGA candidates because we can totally beat them. They're much easier. These are the people who knew Trump couldn't possibly win and knew Hillary was inevitable. And they think they know how to, I don't know. If I made that kind of a catastrophically bad mistake, the correct response there is to kind of like duck your head down and go, oh shit, I'm not going to try to touch the controls again for a while, And instead they're like grabbing the controls and like doing whatever the fuck they want with them. And it's just so dumb. It's so frustrating and dumb. And so anyway, these people do this stuff. They get candidates like Lake, and then I end up consistently, like, I not only voted for Hillary, went out and knocked doors for her. And the only reason I kind of feel good about having done that is, A, I can say it. It's like, I not only, after Bernie lost, not only voted for Hillary, I went out and at least once a week, and occasionally more, I went out from like mid-August through election day, including actually election day. Went out knocking on doors. A couple of weeks I did calls instead, but mostly went out canvassing. And in Phoenix, even election day was very hot. And in August, it's fucking hot. Even early in the morning, it's fucking hot. And you go out and you knock on the doors and you do the list. And it's just like, I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot from canvassing for Bernie. I learned a lot from canvassing for Medicare for All. And it's interesting. Like Bernie, even the people that weren't going to vote for Bernie like and respect him. I'm generalizing, there are exceptions. I've had much more negative things, or I've heard much more negative things about Bernie from Democrats, these sort of Libby Democrats, than Republicans, or certainly independents. They're like, yeah, I like, they like and would vote for him. I really am convinced that if Bernie would have won that primary, it wouldn't have been close with Trump. It wouldn't have been like striking distance. And instead you have Hillary, and again, like the Medicare for All, I knocked on doors, I talked to a bunch of Republicans as well as Democrats, and people, by and large, even if they are initially kind of like averse to the idea, and even if the name kind of puts them off, you explain to them how it would work and how it works in other countries, and they're like, yeah, that sounds right. People are reachable if you would try. And I wish more people, they do say, like, on average, if you knock on, I don't know if it's 100 doors or an hour worth of doors or whatever, you get maybe one vote. So it's not, in terms of yield, it doesn't feel very great. It does help. If you get enough people doing it, obviously it's enough to matter. But I think more than that, I encourage everybody to do it because how often do you talk to your neighbors? Like you may have like that one crazy MAGA neighbor across the street that you talk to occasionally and you're like, oh shit, this person's fucking insane and deranged. But how often do you just knock on doors and talk to people and you get a real sense of who they are? Now with the Hillary ones, they were mostly, not all, but mostly the lists that they gave me were high propensity voters. So people who were registered Democrats who voted in the last 3 elections, I think is how they define that. For the Bernie ones, they gave me a much broader, you know, I think some of them were a little bit more targeted, but for the most part, they were pretty broad. I think they were mainly people, they must have been people who could vote in the primary. I think that was the restriction. But other than that, pretty broad. And they were, by and large, down with Bernie. And a lot of Republicans I've talked to, down with Bernie. And it's not because Trump and Bernie are close. They're totally fucking dissimilar. It's because people like, but they see how fucked up things are. They want hope and change. It's why Obama won. People are desperate for it. You can see things are fucked up. You know that we need to change stuff. And you feel like this is so fucked. And now granted, there are a lot of people who are racists and, you know, sexist and anti-Semitic and God knows what that also like Trump. A lot of them also, I'm convinced, were abused as children, or they just had really bad family dynamics, or like they're adult children of alcoholics and they haven't dealt with that at all. It's an interesting thing also. The thing that made me really realize that, or kind of think that at least, jumping on topics again, but when Deidre Aboud was running, I went to an event with her and there were a bunch of these giant air quotes patriot people at that event. They used to follow her around. They were almost her best fans because they're like so opposed to her. They'd have to, it's fucking weird. I mean, nobody cares about you more than the people that hate you, I guess, is. But while I was there, I talked with 4 or 5 of them. I didn't talk with all of them, talked with a few of them. When I say talked with 4 or 5, I mean, pretty much like was face to face with all of them, but they had a few people who kind of spoke for the group. There was one woman there who actually seemed like pretty grounded and like almost reasonable, and which was weird. But the rest of the group, varying degrees of like social problems, and like there was a dude there who must have ridiculously good genes because I think he was like 60 something. And then he looked like he was in his 30s. But talked with this guy and he was like off his fucking rocker. He is a guy that I've seen him at a bunch of events. It's one of these guys, all of these, well, I'm generalizing, but a lot of these people, they're on Facebook Live. I think that's what they're using. And they're out at these events and they have their phone and they're just recording it and they're talking on it. And you watch their phone while they're doing it and you see all the likes coming up. So they got a bunch of fucking people rewarding them for this. And they're just like, they're bringing their guns to these events and they're like out there, often with like fucking swastika, and not just the like desaturated cop Nazi flag, but fucking like World War II era Germany Nazi flag kind of things. They've got that. They've got all this shit. They've got always the "Don't tread on me." And you talk to them and like there's something off in a lot of these people, which, you know, it's sad. And I'm not saying that it's because there's something off that they did this, but I mean, I suspect there's something off. They're lonely and they found a community and something that was gratifying and rewarding. I think that's part of it. I think also, like a lot of these people, and obviously I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't diagnose people. I'm not trained in any of this stuff. I am just using my judgment, which is semi-informed at least, but you know, maybe I'm wrong. But I really felt like a lot of these people were abused as kids And again, not that just by being abused as a kid you become an asshole, but it does make it, I mean, part of why Trump is so fucked up is because his parents were very, especially his dad. I mean, you hear the stories about Fred Trump, and you feel sorry for the motherfucker. You're like, man, if you could have been okay, and this guy just fucked you up. Now, granted, that doesn't make it okay that you did all this other fucked up shit, and that you're going to the grave being fucked up and hurting people and stoking the flames of racism and all of this other stuff. But yeah, you can kind of get it. Kanye, he's mentally ill as well, and again, nothing wrong with that. And the mental illness doesn't cause the stuff that he does, but it probably factors into how it presents itself. And I don't think he was abused as a kid, although who knows? But he was definitely like raised as this sort of golden child. And, if you're raised as the Messiah, it's very bad for you. Like, there are people who can survive that and become like okay people, but it is the exception of the exception. And most people who are raised that way, they're going to be a little fucked up. Musk, I don't know as much about his childhood, but I know his dad was an asshole, or is an asshole. I think he's still around, and in fact, I've heard some weird stories about him as an adult. And yeah, it's not hard to put some things together and kind of think like probably neglected, at least psychologically abused, probably, a bunch of different stuff probably happening. But anyway, getting back to these people, I talked a lot with them, and other than this one woman who I think was maybe just friends with them and was kind of like, she was like the translator, the sort of rational one. It was very weird because like somebody would say something unhinged and then she would translate that to something that sounded reasonable. And I think she was just friends with them and probably like, got swept up in it. But these other people, they're like, whoa. The guy who was in his 60s, who looked like he was in his 30s, who's always, If you saw him, so he's always, every time I've seen him, he's been carrying a gun. And if you saw him, I mean, personally, if I see somebody with a gun, including cops, but especially somebody who's not in uniform, I see that and it, makes my sphincters all kind of like cinch up a little bit. It's not the best feeling. It kind of makes me want to leave and cross the street. Not that, of course, they have the point and click murder tool, so murder remote control. Crossing the street doesn't necessarily get you away from them, but at least it gets you maybe away from their attention. I don't know. But this guy, I feel like if you saw him, you would think, you might have that element of something is wrong with him. He feels kind of sad and a little bit broken. But also, and a component of that is like, you have the compassion for him, but you also go like, I don't know what this guy's gonna do. This is the scary thing about people who are a little off, because they're not predictable. They could be totally benign and not do anything, or my ex-wife and I, she was doing her PhD research, and one of her research things involved doing spectrophotometry on cultures in a 96 well plate, and they had to be done, I don't know if it was every 8 hours or every 12 hours or whatever. Whatever it was, that meant that we went in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m. or something like that to go do some lab work. So we come down, turn right onto rural, and there's a guy on the side of, not a lot of traffic, guy on the side of the road, standing by his bike, holding his bike, and he definitely looked a little off. And we're like, after we turned, he was maybe 5 meters down, and you wouldn't like, he went from a little off to picked up his bike, was angry and screaming at us, and threw his bike at us. I don't think it hit the car. Well, Ford Explorer. My ex-wife was into trucks and things, which bizarrely enough, I mean, I'm embarrassed by that element of my past that was with somebody who was into that stuff, but that was a giant vehicle. Her dad had an Expedition, which is an even bigger vehicle. And I recently saw one from that era, and next to these motherfucking giant ass trucks, they look tiny. They look wee. These trucks have gotten so fucking big that these old cars, and it's not that the old ones were not so big, it's that they were giant, and these current ones are just, they're like roided out monstrosities, But anyway, he threw this thing at us, and we're fine, it's not that big of a deal, but it definitely freaked us out. It definitely got some, I went from being very tired to kind of keyed up on adrenaline for the next hour or so when she was doing her readings. And the thing about it is just, again, people are probably fine, but you don't know. When people are not behaving in a consistent and predictable way, or they seem like something is off, they're a little scary, not because you think, not because they're inherently going to be violent, but just because if somebody's unpredictable, that could be on the menu. Now granted, somebody could look completely composed and rational and calm, and totally zen, Buddhist monk, and they could be strapping, and then they just pull out their Uzi and shoot a bunch of people. But it's probably, playing by the odds. That person's probably not going to murder you or to do anything that's going to hurt you. You see the person who looks disturbed, and especially if they look a little angry, and you're like, this could be okay, but it could also be not so okay. I mean, and it's not just this guy was not particularly big or strong, but throwing the bike, it's a little scary because it's we're in the truck, but still you're like, what else is gonna happen here? You don't know. When I was volunteering at Tempe St. Luke's, and I was thinking about going to medical school, volunteered there for a year. And while I was doing that, they had me do a variety of things, but one of the things they had me do was kind of babysit people. So actually, I was going to talk about one example there, but kind of counter example. One of the people they had me sort of babysit was a guy, and he had schizophrenia, and you could tell, very smart and knowledgeable, and his brain was just kind of broken, and he seemed extremely benign. There didn't seem to be any hate or anger there, and he was just saying stuff that word salad-y stuff that you could see it, to him it seemed to make sense in his head, and it was not comprehensible. Although after a while, you kept listening to it, and you're like, you kind of feel like there's some underlying something there that you're almost getting. I can't remember what he was talking about, but there were words that repeated and themes that repeated, and yeah, I was kind of, I was listening to him and being polite, and yeah, I kept hearing some stuff, and I was like, you kind of think maybe he's trying to say something around this something, and it's just that his brain is misfiring. So you have that kind of example. Didn't seem dangerous at all or scary. And he was physically, if he was threatening, probably could have fucked me up. He was, bigger than me, taller than me, more muscular, and, all of this. Did not feel at all threatened there. But there was a woman, older woman, probably in her, I'm just guessing, looked like 70s or 80s. I don't know. Not physically imposing, but she had dementia. I'm not diagnosing, but it was some kind of dementia. And they had me hang out with her, and she just had this angry scowl on her face, and she didn't do anything, but I was hanging out with, and she was not really conversant. She wasn't talking at all. She was just angry and confused. You could see coming through just anger and confusion, and made me a little bit nervous to be in close in fact, I didn't stand too close to her. I deliberately stood more than arm's reach away while I was kind of like there. And it's not that like she was that physically imposing, but when somebody is, you know, they look angry and they look like they're gonna like unpredictable, you don't know what's gonna happen. And I mean, it's like the bar fight thing. You might be a martial artist. You could be The Rock, and all it takes is one lucky punch, and you're down. So it's not like a thing to fuck with. At least that's my way of looking at it. Um, you don't. Not that I thought she was gonna sock me, but you're like, is she gonna stab me? Is she gonna do? You know, not that I thought that she had a knife, but you know, I mean, who fucking knows? Who fucking knows what somebody's gonna do? It made me nervous, in the same way that this guy on the side of the street made me a little bit nervous. Um, but anyway, I'm getting off. The thing about this guy that I'm talking about, the older guy who, again, physically very good genes, or something, I don't know. He gives you a little bit of that vibe. Like, I didn't, you know, he seems reasonably rational, and you can have a conversation with him. But a little scary also. Like, just looks a little off, like a little unpredictable. If you were standing in the same room with him, you might kind of keep an eye on him. You know, you're not, you know, like, I don't think he's going to do anything, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did something. And yeah, so you have people like that. And then a lot of the people were just like angry and I think angry, broken, and kind of felt like maybe they were abused as a kid or who knows what. And certainly a lot of them were lower socioeconomic status. And you could tell that, not as much education. And they're just kind of in this group, and they found a place where they could have status and they could have friends and they could have all of this kind of stuff. And they also, I think part of it was they found it gratifying to have like Deidre. One of the things about Deidre that I kind of liked and respected was she would just talk to them, and most people wouldn't talk to them. And when you won't talk to somebody, you know, it kind of puts a barrier there, right? So now, granted, I'm not sure that you're going to have a very productive conversation with them. I'm not sure how much you get out of talking with them. But they appreciate that and they find it gratifying. And I think that was one of the reasons they probably kind of hated her, but also would kind of, you know, like hang around. It's one of the reasons also why I don't think they were at the Women's March a few weeks back, but they usually are. And if they were there, I didn't see them. They probably were, and I just didn't see them because I probably deliberately avoided them and didn't even like my brain edited them out. But like at the March for Our Lives, they were always there with guns, doing stuff to provoke people. The Bernie things, they'd be like off on a side street, and they were just like there. And I think one of the reasons that they would do it is because they had community there. They felt purpose. They felt kind of, and then they had the video thing, and you see those. There's something. I mean, I've had a viral tweet, and when you keep refreshing, and it's like, holy shit, 20,000 people liked this, and then a minute later, it's like, holy shit, 22,000 people liked this, and it's just like, it activates your amygdala, and you're like, whoa, shit, this is good. It's stupid, it's dumb, it doesn't mean anything, but it's gratifying, you know? And if you don't have much going on in your life, and you have this Facebook community, and you have this in-person community, I'm sure that helps. And I do think part of it is also like, you know, and I'm not in any way dismissing, like they're definitely racist and anti-Semitic and a lot of, you know, like super sexist. They're pro-forced birth, Christo-fascists. So everything that I'm saying, put in that context, none of this is excusing that. It's just extra context to kind of understand a little bit. Not to excuse, not to make any of this okay, but, you know, just so you have some more perspective. And I think, I don't know, the thing that I think about these people, and I think it's one of the reasons why Trump was appealing, and it's not just them. I mean, the people who voted for Trump were not just these air quotes patriots. They were also a lot of Republicans. And I mean, one of the things is I think the stuff that he said, an interesting thing, when you would talk, I've spoken with a lot of Republicans, and the ones that voted for him but had criticisms of him, their criticism wasn't that, you had to kind of tease this apart, because it wasn't that they didn't like what he was saying, it was that they didn't like that he was saying it out loud. That was, and again, I'm generalizing, but I really, out of a decent sample size of people, pretty strong supermajority of them who were like normal, air quotes, Republicans, the sane, reasonable ones, who voted for him, of course, the George Conways of the world. They would not like him because he's like, oh, he's saying the quiet part out loud. And I think a lot of the other people that like him because he's saying the quiet part out loud, and they agree with it, and they're like, yeah, that's like game on. But anyway, I do think one of the reasons that some of these people are open to somebody like Bernie isn't that they're politically even close. It's that they see how fucked up the system is. They see that the Democratic Party has a lot of problems, and the Republican Party as well. But, I'm certainly, every time, just to be clear, every time I criticize the Democrats, yes, the Republicans are worse. Yeah, I think that's a given. I know people who would argue that, oh, they're both the same. They're not the same. Yeah, they're really not the same. They're terrible. Don't get me wrong. Like, Biden is fucking terrible. Katie Hobbs, fucking terrible. Hillary, I could psychoanalyze Hillary for a long time. I think she's broken also. I mean, and also, like, frankly, I think I talked about this before, but a while back there was a thing where she shared the speech she was going to give if she won. Or if you asked her, probably when she won. Because in the speech, and from other things that I've heard, I think she really believed it was like providence, like literally God ordained that she would become president. And in the speech, that was the structure of the speech. It was like inevitably she was going to be. It's disturbing because it's like, okay, you're a little delusional. Like, I don't know where this is coming from exactly, but a little off. And the thing about Hillary is like, and I feel this way about Pelosi too. Hillary, I think, is more redeemable than Pelosi, which is a very negative thing for Pelosi. But Hillary and women of kind of their age, they, at a certain point, I mean, when Hillary did her healthcare plan, which was pretty good in the 90s, her wearing a pantsuit was like so risque. It was, you have to put into the context, like she was a feminist for her time. Now, by today's standards, not really. Not really. She's more of what we would call a TERF, although I don't even like calling them TERFs because I think the feminist part is overly generous, but she was kind of a little bit radical for her time. She was a little bit out there. Although, of course, she and Bill really ushered in and cemented that neoliberal sort of, they basically redefined what the Democrats were and made that the identity, and kind of fucked us in a lot of ways. Basically like the Republican-like kind of stuff. But, there's an element of this as well. And of course she also, I'm trying to condense a lot of stuff to a little time, but I think she was a Goldwater person, so put everything into the context where it belongs. But you do kind of feel sorry for her because she got fucked over by the Republicans, and she definitely did. Like, it's true, she was unfairly sort of derided and persecuted, not prosecuted, but like, just part of the reason people don't like her, including Democrats, is that these Republicans just kept saying the same shit over and over and over again, and they hated her. Like, the Republicans hated her, and then they did a really good job of PR, and they got a bunch of people to hate her. And again, like, getting back to that, why you should knock doors, don't knock doors thinking you're going to persuade that many people. I think the reason you should knock doors is because you're going to talk to people and you're going to get some perspective. And I think when you're knocking doors, you should knock doors on a list that's like hyperpensity Dems. And you should also knock doors that's like a random list or no list at all. When I did the Medicare for All ones, we just literally went door to door and knocked every door and talked to everybody who would talk to us. And in the places we did that, yeah, even by ASU, you'd get some Democrats, but you'd also get some pretty fucking crazy Republicans. And again, like, you get an interesting perspective on that stuff. But when I was knocking on the hyperpensity doors for Hillary, so many people said they didn't like her, they didn't trust her, all these kinds of things. And, you know, they might have been saying things that were not true or accurate about her, but the problem is what people perceive is essentially reality from a practical perspective. And the thing that bothers me is like her campaign was just like, oh, she's inevitable. She's inevitable. And of course, saying you're inevitable, basically, all that really accomplished was discouraged people from actually voting because they're like, oh, she's going to win anyway. Why do I need to vote? You get a lot. I know a lot of people who did that. You'd get the she's inevitable, so let's not even address, like, oh yeah, some people are, it's just Republicans who don't like her. And the problem is, of course, I knocked on hyperpensity Dems. I talked to more than one hyperpensity Dem who said they were going to vote for Trump, and I could not persuade, like, they were not movable because they didn't like her. They thought she was a criminal, all this kind of stuff. And the thing is, yeah, it's untrue, but her campaign should have said, like, oh shit, people think this, let's do something about it. You know, that's the part that, it's like, yeah, you're unfairly being demonized, but simply ignoring it, I mean, to some extent, it's a kind of weird thing, because to some extent, somebody accuses you of something that you haven't done. Getting really defensive about it doesn't make it, it's, if anything, it's probably going to make people think, well, why are you so defensive about that? You're bringing it up. It's not necessarily the right way to address it. But what you can do is make it, like, don't directly address what they're saying, but show in other ways that it's not true. You know, demonstrate that it's not true. Be really consistent. Be really, you know, be the opposite of those things. It's one of the reasons why, like, the stupid email server thing, I totally understand why she did it. Yeah, okay, I don't know all the details, but I've read enough about it where it's like she had her team and she's trying to go through the right channels to get the right encrypted email stuff set up, and it's just taking for fucking ever, and she needs to talk to people. And at a certain point, it's like, you can just tell. It's like, okay, fuck it. We're just going to do it. Ask forgiveness, not permission. Yeah. Which generally is fine, but the problem is when you're going to be a politician, that goes against the whole premise of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. And once you do stuff that looks a little sketchy or is not completely like dotting every I and crossing every T, it raises questions. And it erodes your credibility entirely. So like you do something here, and even that's a little minor thing, all of a sudden people think much worse of you, and it also makes false accusations stick a little bit more. Yeah, it's like, oh well, they did this, so they could totally have done that. Yeah, now some people are very unhinged about this. I do know Republicans who thought, I've talked about this before, they knew, not just thought, they knew, in the same sense that you know that the Earth orbits the sun, which is to say, you don't know anything with absolute certainty, but you're like many, many nines of confidence about this. They knew she killed 50 people. Not necessarily personally, but she had 50 people whacked. And it was such a fucking, like, you know, Looney Tunes kind of thing, because you'd hear these people talk about this, and you're like, well, what evidence are you? And it's not, oh no, there's no evidence because and it's just, I don't know, you talk to people who have that conspiratorial thinking, and they're really hard to, not just to reason with, because when it's like if somebody's in a cult, deprogramming them is a big fucking thing. It's not something you're going to do instantly or overnight. But even just hearing the shit that they're saying, and like, it's physically painful at a certain point. It's like, are you crazy? Like, this is, I mean, come on. I can't even have a conversation with you about something else because this is so like out there and you really believe it. And it's like, yeah. So anyway, coming back, talking to these people on Twitter, and they're sitting there saying, one in particular was like, essentially saying, it turned out actually, as we got further in the conversation, she wasn't saying don't vote, but she was basically saying like, just the world is going to end in 2 years, and so we might as well just not, we're not even going to make it to 2024. This was essentially a thing she was saying. And it's just like, I mean, the reasons that she gave for this, one were the Cascadia earthquake, which is a real thing that could happen. It's, the probability of it happening before 2024 is not that great. And there are things where it's like, well, if sea levels rise, then it increases the probability of this because of the pressure here. But this is not, like, you can't say like, well, this is going to happen. It could happen in 1,000 years. It could happen tomorrow. There's a big range, and you can't really predict it. And you certainly can't assign like a probability, like this is something that it's going to happen inevitably. So don't, I mean, essentially it's like, we might as well just not do anything because we're going to have to prepare for that. And the other one was just, it was the step before that, but glaciers dumping into the sea and then sea levels rising. And she's like, oh, well, New York is going to be underwater. All these liberal cities are going to be underwater. And it's like, yeah, maybe eventually, but not in 2 years. I mean, it's not, maybe they will. Maybe it's possible, but it's unlikely. It takes a while for things to hit equilibrium. The ocean is big. The sea levels can rise quite considerably, but it takes a while to get there, And one of the things, it was kind of frustrating because it was like, I do agree, like I totally agree the Democrats are terrible, and I don't even like rewarding them by voting for them. But then you have fucking Carrie Lake, or fucking Trump, or any of these people, Dr. Oz. I can't say Dr. Oz without doing air quotes, but Dr. Oz. You have people like this, Martha McSally, and you sit there and you're like, Blake, what's his name, Masters. These people are so bad that even though the Democrats suck, I kind of feel like you have to vote for them. And I hate the situation. To me, the number one priority should be like, well, I guess you have to triage, stop the bleeding. So don't let Carrie Lake win. Vote for the terrible Hobbs. But at the same time, do every fucking thing you can to fix the electoral system that forces you to make that call. Because as long as it's this system, we're basically fucked. Like every cycle, it's just over and over again going to be the same thing as it has been. And what are you going to do? Like, I'm so fucking sick of it. And like I've said this before, I know here, but and this sounds like hyperbole. I would almost kind of like to just renounce my citizenship and move it. If there was a good place to go, move to another country. And the problem, of course, is like, want to spend time with my mom and sister, and like they're already far away. And if I was in another country, it'd be further. And then also, it's like, are you going to go to France? Like, France has a kind of surging right-wing thing coming up. What country would you go to? I don't know. Like maybe New Zealand. I don't know. Japan has some good things about it. Like people, every time I see pictures of Japan, I see people masked. Not everybody's masked, but I see a lot of people masked up. And I love, like, that is one thing. Like I go out now and nobody's even the people who were doing it before have pretty much given up on it. And even the people who I think, like, I generally feel good about, but they're just like, I'm not going to do it anymore. Or, I'm not going to do the N95. I'm just going to do, like, the surgical mask. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess that's fine. It's better than nothing. But it's also, like, not helping that much. Yeah. But anyway, it's frustrating. It's a frustrating situation. And to me, I don't want to be in this situation where I have to vote for Biden again. I feel terrible about it. I feel terrible every fucking time. Like, voting for Sinema. It took a lot to vote for fucking Sinema. Voting for fucking Hobbs, I'm disgusted with myself that I voted for Hobbs, but the thing is, like, do you vote for Hobbs or do you not vote against Lake? And, voting, and Hobbs is particularly bad. Sinema is particularly bad. But, like, you have Mark Kelly, who, on a relative scale, he's fantastic. But he's actually pretty shitty, too. I've talked with him, I've talked with his staff, and I was not impressed. Let's just say that on their healthcare sort of stuff. And I really got the impression, actually, that he has a very superficial. Now, granted, I'm going through his staff and getting an impression of him from them. So maybe he's actually like totally on it. But the impression that I got was basically he has a very superficial kind of understanding of this stuff. He has a really check the box, say the key words kind of perspective on it. That was what I got mostly. I was not impressed at all. And he's also shitty for a bunch of other reasons. And also, he didn't have a primary. Katie Hobbs didn't have a primary. Well, I mean, she technically had a primary this time, but basically the state party was like, Katie Hobbs, she put in the time, she's shaken the right hands, she's done the whole sequence that you're supposed to go through. It's her turn, so we're gonna give it to her. And I mean, it's just like there are other people. I guarantee there are other people in the state who would be better as governor and who would campaign better than her. And yet, not even on the primary. There were a couple people who were kind of like, eh. And then you have Katie Hobbs, who's like, ugh. But like Kelly, there no primary, none at all. Not even. I mean, think about how fucked up the system has to be, where a position like being a senator. Can you imagine how like? I would love to be a senator. I mean, it's like great fucking. There are things about it that are a pain in the ass, but it's a very high prestige job where you actually get to you're one out of 100 people who get to do something, and have a real impact on the world. And yeah, I mean, it's an appealing position. And you look at all these Democrat climbers, and nobody, not one person, ran against Kelly. Yeah. I mean, think about what that says about how much influence the party has. They're all like, like Rubin. Not that Rubin. Yeah. He has some problems. But he's probably in a position where he could have done it. There are a bunch of other people who certainly could have done it. And nobody even threw their fucking their hat in the ring. Nobody's like, I'm gonna try. And basically because the day that he was announced, and instantly as soon as he's announced, also like millions of dollars in donations, because they set this stuff up in, I mean this unfortunately it sounds conspiratorial, except it's a thing that's real. They set these things up, and they decided, months before, like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. You're all gonna donate on this day. We're all gonna, and he's gonna be the nominee. And I know that you're a representative and you'd kind of like to be senator, but if you try to run against him, it's basically gonna fuck your political career, and we're not gonna have your back anymore. And then, just rationally, like, people are like, okay, I don't want to do that. And you'd also get a lot of heat, and so you end up with Mark Kelly, who, again, he's better than Sinema in the same sense that Biden is better than Trump. Maybe, to be fair, he's a little bit better than Biden. Like, put some but he's not good. He's not good at all. And it's just depressing. It's just like, it's so anti-democratic. It's as anti-democratic as, like, they fuck with the primaries. It's as anti-democratic there as gerrymandering, or, like, as like going out and suppressing the votes. as anti-democratic as these fuckers who are wearing masks and they're going out to the voting collection things. They're like intimidating people. It's not good. And those are the Democrats, you know? So you got the Republicans who suck, you have the Democrats who suck, and you have a bunch of people who I'm generally kind of aligned with politically who think they both suck and so they don't vote. And to me, it's like, you know, okay. Or to me, like the voting is so little and it's so easy and people died for me to vote and I'm a fucking cishet white dude. You know, it's like people died for that. If you're black or a woman, people died much more recently for it. And, you know, 50 years, 150 years, or 100 years rather, not 50 years, 100 years, 150 years. Those are recent. Those are not that long ago. To me, maybe you sign, maybe you fill out the thing, maybe you just do it. And hopefully, like, go to the fucking primary and vote for somebody who's better. Of course, you still have the Kelly problem, but, you know, at least then you can do something. And then at the same time, lobby people and spend time like getting signatures and doing the things for ranked choice voting or approval voting if I was given my way. Yeah, it's just annoying. It's just annoying. So they're anti-voting, and they also think, you know, well, and I don't even necessarily disagree with them. Every time I vote for Biden or Sinema or, you know, fucking Hobbs or Hillary, all I'm saying is you can safely ignore me. Like, I may have these demands, I may want better things, but I'm literally just telling the Democrats, like, my voice doesn't count because I'm a safe vote. There's some truth to that. But the problem is, it's like, in order to demonstrate that I'm not a safe vote, do I risk letting fucking Kari Lake win? Do I risk letting Trump win? I hate this situation. I hate it so much that giving up my citizenship seems like an appealing idea in contrast, because I know in 24 it's going to be more of the same shit, and if I stay here, it's just going to be, as long as there's the ability to vote, it's going to be like, you know, just getting beaten in the face with fucking giant fish by somebody every fucking cycle. And it's like, you know, I don't want that. I hate it. I fucking hate it. I care. And that's why it's torture for me. If I didn't care, then I wouldn't give a shit. I'd be like, fuck it. I'm not gonna. But the problem is, like, Trump winning has consequences. He got the Supreme Court. He got 200 plus federal judges. Yeah, that's had some pretty fucking big consequences. Even like student loans, student loan forgiveness. Biden had this half-assed, watered-down kind of joke of we're gonna, if you're not earning past this certain threshold, and we'll give you 10K. If you had a Pell Grant, we'll give you 20K. Totally arbitrary. Luckily, last year I wasn't earning past that threshold, and I did have a Pell Grant because my mom didn't make a lot of money when I was a kid, and I would have got 20K off, but some Republican asshole who Trump nominated decided, you know what? Yeah, we're not going to do that. Now, maybe it'll go through, maybe it won't, I don't know. But it does always annoy me that they do this kind of like half-assed shit to kind of appease the Republicans, or to sort of go like, well, see, we're not just giving away the full 1.8 trillion. We're going to give away like a tiny bit, hundreds of billions of dollars. And the problem is, yeah, you're not appealing to anyone and you're fucking over a lot of people. It's just so annoying. They won't appeal to me because I'm safe, but they will try to appeal to some fuckers who never are going to vote for them. And who also, like, if you wanted to really persuade those people to vote for you, give them something which they feel, which they can't deny, and which is awesome. And people will start going like, hey, maybe this stuff is not so bad. Give them universal health care. I have had so many bad experiences. I have, like, probably one of the better, I'm not financially like that well off, but I have enough at least on my credit cards, that I can pay medical bills. I have pretty good insurance. I have a sister who's a doctor, and I have enough free time to do things like this and to make calls and, do stuff a little bit. So I feel like I have one of the better experiences in terms of our healthcare system, in giant air quotes. And yet it sucks fucking horribly. I'm basically healthy. I don't have to deal with the worst kinds of things. I've had a very minor surgery. Don't have to deal with the worst kinds of things. And it's horrible. It's terrible. And it's a universal thing. Everybody gets sick. Everybody knows somebody who's sick. Everybody has a relative who has been sick or injured. And, maybe more than one. And you deal with this every fucking day. And so you give them the whole like Romney Care, Heritage Foundation, or was it Heritage Foundation? Probably was. But you give them the whole ACA, which is basically like written by the insurance industry and pharmaceutical companies and all of these companies who have vested interests in the way things are. And you don't give them universal health care. You don't give them even a private option, a public option rather. And so everybody gets it, and it's like, well, this is kind of shitty too. In fact, it kind of sucked more. Like, I'm not saying that the ACA was bad. My sister was able to afford insurance before she wasn't able to afford insurance. As a doctor, making a fuck ton of money by most people's standards could be like, it was a massive thing for her. But like for me, especially I was younger then, I was low risk and all of this. And when I was making very little, it was nice because my monthly thing was basically zero because it was subsidized. But then I started making like 40, 50, 60K. And so I was in the place where I was on an ACA plan, but I had no subsidy. And it every year kept getting more expensive and more expensive and more expensive. The deductibles kept going up, what the shit covered went down. And it was also like every company, like I was with one that was terrible, and then they stopped doing it. And then I was with like Ambetter, and then they stopped offering it. And then I was with Oscar Health, which I didn't realize at the time was a Kushner fucking thing. If I knew that, I wouldn't have signed up for that one. But I was like, oh, it's the same situation with all of this insurance. I have a PhD. When I was at ASU and I had my little packet of, I think it was 5 insurance plans and PPO and all this, HMO, PPO, all of this kind of stuff. And you have to figure out which one do you want to sign up for. And you have like a week. I have all these packets, and I spent that week reading them and trying to understand, like, what do I really want? What's the best thing for me? And honestly, I don't think, even if you knew the future and you knew you were going to get sick or you were going to get injured or what was going to happen, I don't think you could rationally pick one of those plans. You couldn't say, like, this is the right one. In fact, I'm sure it's a deliberate choice that they have made the coverage better and worse in different dimensions, so you can't really compare them. It's like a random throw a dart at the board thing. It's like the withholdings. Every time you sign up for a job, again, PhD physics, I sign up for withholdings and I have no idea what the right number is. I'm partly exaggerating there, but not that much. And yeah, it's just like, you guys know what my income is. Withhold the right amount. It's so dumb. But anyway, yeah, if we would have instead, imagine a better world, right? Here is your Carte Vitale, your healthcare card. Instantly with this, now, okay, it's big government and all that stuff, but okay. You have this healthcare card, and I'm going to tell you what it's going to do for you. This card, you'll go in, and first off, you'll give it to them. They'll scan it. You won't have to fill out 10 pages worth of forms because all of your shit is on there. You won't have the situation where you have 2 doctors and they're not talking to each other because all of your fucking medical records are attached to that. And you're not going to pay anything. And I don't mean you're not going to pay anything there and then you're going to get a bill for $12 like 6 weeks later, and if you don't pay it, which incidentally you can't pay online you have to call us or send a check because it's the fucking 18th century or whenever checks were in use. Yeah, I mean, you have this card. You need medical care. You go in, use it, easy, walk away, and at the end you're like, do I owe anything? And they're like, well, or are we square? And they're like, oh, did you need to be paid for parking or for the metro to get back home? You know, like an NHS kind of thing. We could have that. We could fucking have that. And instead, it's like, well, okay, you have to get in this mad rush at the end of the year in this little window on this website that it was, of course, made by some shitty contractor. Couldn't be, and that website has to interface with God knows how many different fucking insurance companies who all have different APIs and different data structures and all this kind of stuff. And of course, it's going to suck. Of course, it's going to suck, and of course, it's going to be hard. And of course, also, because it's got to be a private company building it, God knows how much money is getting poured into some private hands. And once we do that, it's like, okay, now you have a gun to your head. You have to buy insurance through this thing that sucks. It's going to be expensive if you're making very much. And the thing is, like, if somebody's making like 50 or 60K, they're not doing that well. You know, it's better than if you're making 20K. It's better than being near the poverty line. But if you're at like the median household income and you're in a position where you feel like you're doing okay and you get this slap in the face with a few $100 a month for insurance, that if you use the insurance, you almost always have a massive deductible, which I discovered something got fucked up, and I ended up for a brief time when I had that Oscar thing not being able to pay because they wouldn't accept it. This is a dumb thing. In California, you can actually pay with a credit card because of a law that they passed. But here, you can't pay with a credit card. It had to be a debit card. And 1 month, I wasn't able to pay myself. So it's like, okay. The month later, I think I could have done it. But for a brief time, I could not muster that 200 something bucks. I didn't have it. And so I called them and tried to talk to them. They're like, oh, okay. And basically just let it lapse, lost the insurance. And then I had to go in for, I don't know if it was strep throat or what it was. I had to go in for something. And I went in the previous year to the same doctor with the health plan that I had. It was like $100 I had to pay out of pocket. Without that, it was like 25 bucks. Like, what the fuck are you doing when it's like, what the fuck? You know, I have insurance now, had this foot surgery, and I go in, I got a weird cryptic email. It's like, you should check your statement from United Healthcare, my current provider, my current insurer. And actually, insurer should be in air quotes too. And I look at it, and it's like almost everything, they didn't actually pay for a lot of stuff. I apologize for that noise. I just touched the mic. They didn't pay for stuff. They just had like a discounted rate. So it's like, oh, you got billed $1,600. The discount is like $1,200, and now you owe this much, which is the delta. We didn't pay anything. We're just, and so you look at that and you're like, well, obviously they just raised the rate so that you could lower the rate so that we could, the whole system is so dumb. Like so many things also. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why Twitter sucks, is one of the reasons why YouTube sucks. Like every fucking video is like some dude with that YouTube look and the whole text and all this shit. Because it's all a marketplace. Everything is run like a fucking business. Everything is like the pursuit of maximizing profit and maximizing followers or whatever the metric that you're measuring and trying to go for. And then, it's so bad. It just means everything turns to shit. Every doctor has to make money, which obviously, there's one thing about making money, like making enough money to live a nice life. It's not bad, right? But you're a doctor, you have hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. You have a lifestyle you want to maintain, so you have to make money. And then you're in a position where you're like, okay, I have to spend all this money dealing with the insurance companies, and I have to somehow find how to maximize my profits. And then they end up doing what they do. And then you have the insurance companies who are like, well, we're for profit, which means we owe a legal fiduciary duty to our shareholders to maximize profit, which means that we need to take in as much money as possible and pay out as little money as possible. Literally, that's like a legal requirement. Like they could get sued for not doing it, which means in turn, we're going to raise the premiums as high as we can and pay out as little as we can, because that's what we do. We're a company. And you look at that and it's like, it's just so fucked up in so many different ways. And it's all the same underlying like extreme, I'm not trying to say capitalism is like the root of all evil, but it is so fucked up. Anyway, the reason, now that I'm like an hour in, or the reason this one is called Revolution is that this person that I was talking to on Twitter was like, oh, we need to have a revolution. And it's like, okay, how do you think that, like, play that out. How do you think that's going to be feasible? You need a revolution. You can't get Bernie elected. You're going to have you don't have enough people to do it. You don't have the resources to do it. And also, like, if you tried to do it and you were somehow successful in like overthrowing the government, you know what would happen? You have all these fucking crazy MAGA people who have a lot of guns. They have just fucking militias and they're very heavily armed and all this kind of stuff. And also, by the way, a lot of the military, a lot of the police forces who are also the military or a military or paramilitary, I guess to be fair, they're all or very largely dominated by MAGA people. How do you think it's going to play out? Like, really? And it's just like, you hear these people talking about this shit and it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't vote for Democrats. Like, of course you have to vote for them, because if you don't, you're going to let the other person who's crazy and terrible win. Well, you should just have a revolution. You're not going to have a fucking revolution, you know? I mean, and I don't just mean the whole thing about like carrying around pictures of Chairman Mao. And nobody's going to want to hang with you anyhow. But I mean, having a revolution is much worse than you think it is. Having society collapse also, like, there are a lot of these people that think they're like accelerationists and they think, oh yeah, we want it. And granted, maybe things will be okay in hundreds of years. Rome collapsed and then eventually we got to here. Maybe things will be okay, but it could be a very long time before they are. And generally speaking, revolutions don't go the way you might hope, And I mean, in general, a lot of like the way it probably rolls, you're rolling the dice. The way it probably plays out is you get some kind of like a fascist, Christo-fascist, authoritarian government, much more likely than a leftist thing. But let's say that you get lucky and you end up having, somehow there are tons of people who are willing to rise up. They're not, but imagine that they are. And they're all like super lefties and all this kind of stuff. And they send all of the landlords to re-education camps or whatever. And they do all this kind of stuff. Historically, and I understand, like, again, I hang out with a lot of people on Twitter who are communists. And I get it. And I generally, like, the kind of Star Trek, like luxury space communism thing, I'm pretty down with that. But the problem is that when that kind of stuff has contact with reality, and I've listened to, what is his name? I can't think of the guy's name. Hardcore History with Dan Carlin. Listen to that, and they have a couple of things where they're about these revolutions, and one of them was about the sort of coffee shops, pre-Bolshevik revolution and that kind of time. And like people were genuinely like, they thought this was a good idea. They thought they were super behind it. They thought, and then you build the system up, and what happens is it kind of falls apart because you have this economic system that has certain needs that need to be met. And you have no way to motivate people except at a certain point, like gulags and, forcing people to do stuff and being like hyper authoritarian. Once you have real automation and you can farm for free and do any kind of construction or manual labor for free, things are different. But when you're in a situation like they were still pre-industrial, and you want to go from that to like have a 5-year plan and industrialize the country, things didn't work that well. It took a lot of, let's just say it didn't work that well. And again, like, I think you have people who have good intentions, and then they get in the situation, they're like, oh shit, people are starving. And then you go like, oh, well, what are we going to do? And then you start, even if you start out really open, you're like, well, we can't have people talking about how things are starving, so we're going to kind of button things down. You can't have people not working, so we're going to start sending them to work camps, and we're going to, it escalates in a bad way. And it's you have to, there are many unintended consequences that sometimes you can foresee and sometimes you can't, but that's like that's like one of the more optimistic paths. A pessimistic path is you do that, and okay, now you've got this revolution, and now the MAGA people take over, and now you're fucked. You're like really fucked. I don't think that, I'm cautiously optimistic that, like, I do think we have kind of a cold civil war in progress, but I don't think we're on a path to getting to the hot one, mainly because people are so comfortable, and it's like, even for the MAGA people, I do worry that they're gonna, like, it's possible to have a fascist takeover of our government as it is in a few steps, but I don't think there's gonna be like a revolution per se. And I certainly don't think it's gonna be a leftist revolution. Even if you start it, and even if you think like, oh yeah, you're gonna have this whole, what do they call it, the red-brown alliance kind of stuff. Historically, that doesn't go well for you. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, and then you look and you're like, well, okay, it takes time and a lot of effort to fix our electoral system, and it takes time and a lot of effort to get people elected at a local level and the state level, and to change the state constitution. It takes time to put in ballot initiatives, and it takes a lot of money, and it's a pain in the ass, and it sucks. But if you don't do it, then 10 years from now, the world's probably still going to be here. I hate to disappoint you. Cascadia is probably not, the quake is probably not going to happen. It could, probably not. Sea levels will be rising, but they won't probably be meters higher. And you probably will have, like, even if they start rising that much, places like New York will build dikes, and they'll, do stuff about it. Florida's fucked, probably. There are solutions for Florida too. You can dig and freeze the air, or freeze the sort of water down there, or I mean that's probably the easiest thing to do. Just dig, put pipes down, and have a cooling system, and probably solar powered. You could also put concrete or something in, and inject it in and try to break the water cycle. But Florida it's so porous. You'd have to. It would be a very big undertaking. But you could do it. New York, there's enough capital there, there's enough incentive there that you probably don't lose the city. And I'm assuming, of course, you're not getting to a point at some point in the future where agriculture just collapses completely and then society falls apart. And if that happens, we're pretty fucked. Yeah, I mean, you could prepare for that a little bit in some ways, but it would be very, very bad. Which, I think a lot of people would get into this like revolutionary kind of idea, or the like doomsday cult kind of, what are they called? Survivalist-ish thinking. They don't really think about what it would be like, and it would suck. If I always think about this, but like, garbage stops being collected for a week or two. It sucks. If you had no running water, what would you do? You have no running water and it's not coming back. No running, you're just done. And you probably don't even live in Arizona. If you're like Gil and I live in Arizona, water just turns off. No electricity. It would suck in ways that you can't even, I mean, you can think it through and play it out and see how much it would suck. But you're only getting like the smallest bit of a fragment of a taste of what it would be like. And in reality, it would suck so badly. So much worse than you probably can imagine. And also, I mean, you die. Yeah, let's be realistic here. You're probably going to die badly. And even if you survive, people you love and care about will die badly. So not a good path to go down. And which should be motivating to people and be like, let's stop the fucking fossil fuel thing. Let's actually get things under control. Let's not have nuclear war because it's really bad too. And yet, people keep going. It's very depressing. But with that, I'm weirdly, having said all that and being, I feel like things could go very badly, but even if they likely will, you should try, because if they don't go badly and you didn't try, then you fucked yourself. And if they do go badly and you tried, well, I mean, you tried. You're like, okay, we're fucked anyway, but did this thing that, if it would have worked out, would have been better. To me, that's just a no-brainer. It's just, I mean, by all means, like, take care of yourselves and your families and all that, but try to take care of each other too. Try to fix things that are fucked up. Doesn't seem like that tall of an order to me. Anyway, with that, I think this has been long. I need to take a walk, and I really desperately need to change the saline in my contact because I think it's like cloudy or drying out or something. And also, I've been standing for a very long time, and despite having gotten the surgery, my fucking foot is throbbing, and I have a big thing full of fluid in there, so it's awesome. Man, I don't even know what to do there. I have a prescription to get another MRI. MRI costs like $1,500, which is interesting because I had an MRI. I had a head MRI years ago, and it was cheaper than getting my foot done, and better resolution, better quality with contrast agent. They just keep ratcheting up the price, using an old machine, and it's just it's so fucking stupid the way things are. And again, it's like $1,500. Oh, but insurance will cover $1,000 of that, and then you have to pay $500. That's great. So I got one already. I have a script for another one, and I haven't gone in to get it because I haven't even scheduled it. Because it's like, okay, I'll get the MRI. I'll spend $500. And then the doctor will go like, oh, well, there's a thing in your foot. Like, no shit. And then what will we do? But I don't know. I don't think they can fix it. I had surgery, and I'm not saying it's worse than it was, but it's definitely not better. It's definitely not like massively better. And it's frustrating. But anyway, I'll deal with that. It is annoying me. And then also, I don't complain too much about aging. Most things haven't bothered me yet, but one of the things that started bothering me after I ran for office, and I don't know if it's because I was doing too much knocking on doors, and you knock on a door, you talk to somebody, and you're standing there, and it's hard to move around. It's hard to move around while you're talking. Like, I normally like walking and talking. When I'm doing this, it's hard to move around. When you're doing that, it's hard to move around. And it started hurting me. It started hurting my back. And it hurts now. So hopefully walking will help. But anyway, with that, sound like an old man now. Depressing. Revolution probably not going to happen. Prepare for things to go badly, but prepare for things not to go badly too. Because if they don't go badly and you didn't prepare, you'll be fucked. That's all I'm saying. Thanks. Zaijian.